Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. I listened to a podcast today while I was at work. Pablo Torre Finds Out, where basically he took a deep dive on the Bash at the Beach 1998. Hollywood Hogan and Dennis Rodman versus DDP and Karl Malone match, the main event of a WCW pay-per-view that ended up right after the NBA Finals had ended. WCW did something special this summer, and basically they were riding on the success of Goldberg. This is well into WWF figuring it out after WrestleMania 14 and just taking the ball and just running away with it. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I think one of the last times that WCW won the ratings war against WWF might have been maybe a week before the Bash of the Beach, where Goldberg wrestled against Hollywood Hulk Hogan at the Georgia Dome. I was lucky enough to be in attendance there, but it was really a special time in wrestling. But in order to tell the story of this match, you have to get into the backstory. Dennis Rodman had sort of made himself into a real big. He was more than a sports star. He basically was a mainstream celebrity. He almost was like what TMZ was invented for, because every day Dennis Rodman, to make himself a bigger star, he would show up in drag on the Jay Leno show. He wrote a book, and it is book signing. He wore a wedding dress in Times Square. He was going on the Howard Stern show and just saying the weirdest things possible. A few years earlier, when he was traded from the Detroit Pistons to the San Antonio Spurs, he started dyeing his hair pink. He started dyeing his hair green. It really made him stand out. He was a defensive superstar in the NBA, an all defensive player. I'm sure he won the defensive player of the year countless times. He was the king of the rebound. He wasn't a guy that was going to go out there and score 30 points for you. There was a few times in his career when he got hot from three that he really could do it. But his main job in the NBA was just grab boards. And even, not being like a 7 foot tall center, this guy would win the rebounding title by like 5 boards a game over guys. I remember that Upper Decks Collector's Choice. They had a gimmick in there. It was called You Crashed the Game. One of the first years it came out, they had ones for points. They had ones for rebounds. And the Dennis Rodman one won it for me. He had to get 1,000 boards. It made you, as a sports fan, really pay attention to games. And then the next year, they changed it a little bit, where you would get a player's card, and you would need them to either get 10 rebounds or 30 points on a random night that was on the card. If you did that, you could mail the card in, and then you would get a winner's set, where you would get the entire set of the You Crash the Games, and it would have the winner stamped across the top. But I found, as a sports fan, like to go and watch TNT, to watch Derek Coleman, to see what he did that night, because I had his card and I needed him to hit that mark. So I don't know how we got off on that whole deal, but Dennis Rodman, he made himself as a rebounding superstar by dyeing his hair and going out in drag and separating himself. He made himself to where he was starring in a movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme. He was getting commercials. He just was anywhere and everywhere that he could be when he was not on the basketball court. Somehow he hooked up with Hulk Hogan in 1997, and they made a video where basically Dennis Rodman joined WCW, but not only joined the NWO. He was Rodzilla. He talked about, when he was growing up living in Texas, basically on the television, all there was the Von Erichs. And he loved wrestling. Loved it, loved it, loved it. So he came in and right after winning a championship with the Chicago Bulls at Bash at the Beach 1997, he wrestled a match where he got paid $1 million. Eric Bischoff put him in there. It was a tag team match. Dennis Rodman and Hulk Hogan against Lex Luger and the Giant. And, basically with Rodman showing up on Nitro and wrestling in the match, I can remember everything that he did in WCW ended up on SportsCenter. It was just one of those brilliant ideas that Eric Bischoff had of, putting things in the USA Today, that, by giving this guy the $1 million salary, it would pay for itself by bringing in revenue, by giving themselves publicity that they weren't able to go out and buy. Rodman, he did the match at Bash at the Beach 97. He kind of faded away. But the idea was that they would use him in the next summer. I think Rodman liked to wrestle at the Bash at the Beach pay-per-view because of the fact it was right after the NBA season would end. He would still be in shape. He wouldn't have to worry about basketball practice. He wouldn't have to worry about basketball games. He could just go in, do what he needed to do, and basically get paid. And that's all he was really looking to do. But they didn't really know what they were going to do with Rodman. Somewhere along the way, when they were traveling through Texas, Diamond Dallas Page got invited to go to a Houston Rockets game against the Utah Jazz. While they were at the game, Karl Malone had noticed DDP in the stands, and when they were in a timeout and they were walking off the court, looked at him, threw up the diamond cutter, and they couldn't believe what they saw. One of the guys that was sitting with Diamond Dallas Page worked for WCW, and he wanted to get a picture of it to make sure that they were able to put it in the WCW magazine. And he was trying to get Diamond Dallas Page to get Karl Malone to do the diamond cutter deal again. And DDP was like, I don't know him. And he's like, yeah, but he knows you, and he's going to react to you. So the next time out, as Malone was walking to the bench, DDP yelled at him, threw up a diamond cutter. I can't get back far enough. He threw it up, and then Malone answered back with his own diamond cutter, and they were able to get the historic picture that went into WCW's magazine. While they were at the game, Karl Malone sent word to DDP that he wanted him to meet up backstage or in the locker room. I don't know really what you call that. I was going to call it backstage, but they're not at a concert. They're at a basketball game. And they went back there. They exchanged information. And DDP told Karl Malone, like, hey, if you ever want to do this, I've got an inside guy. I can basically get you inside of the ring. Anytime you want to do something on Nitro, you want to tussle, you want to get down. Let's do this. So they exchanged information. A month later down the road, DDP, kind of got the idea, and he went and he pitched it to Karl Malone. Is there basically any way that you would like to get inside of the ring? Because in the upcoming NBA Finals, you're going to be playing the Chicago Bulls. We already have Dennis Rodman coming in. Maybe we can do some sort of thing with you and Rodman. And I think DDP was really trying to pitch himself to get into that main event spot. DDP had been there ever since, winning the big match at Spring Stampede against Macho Man Randy Savage. He had elevated himself up the card. He was one of the main guys in WCW, but he never really was that full-fledged main event guy that they looked at. Malone loved the idea. He'd always wanted to be a wrestler. He grew up in Louisiana, and he dreamed of being a wrestler, being a trucker, being a flight pilot. He never dreamt of being a basketball player. He just got really big and really good at basketball. Probably one of the best power forwards of all time in the NBA. I know that when they did the last all-decade team, he was on that, so he still looked at it as being one of the best of his times. He was on the Dream Team in 90. I think he was selected in 91. They played in 92 in Barcelona. The dude was good, and at 98 he was kind of at the top of his game. Although I don't really think of him playing that much longer. I know that when he left Utah, when Stockton retired, he went to LA the same year Gary Payton did. They were supposed to be making some sort of a dream team, and it just did not work. Malone got injured really, really fast, and that's where he ended up his career. But I can't really think what year that was. 98, Malone might have even been the MVP of the league, if I remember right. But Malone says he's in. DDP, goes over to his neighbor Eric Bischoff's house, who's the president of WCW, and says, hey, this is a really, really good idea. Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman ended up having the same exact agent. So it's easy for them to get this deal done. And going in and sitting in meetings, Eric Bischoff throws out the idea, I'm not asking you guys to do this in a game, not in the game, but anytime that, play has been, called on a timeout and you guys are close to each other, anytime you guys kind of touch, anytime you guys get kind of physical, that's going to help us here. It's going to, make this match bigger than what we got right now. And Karl Malone showed up on Nitro. Dennis Rodman famously skipped the practice after Game 3 to go to Detroit to hang out with the NWO and be on Nitro. And then he ended up going back and having a really, really good Game 4. At one point in the finals, when I was watching the Pablo Torre show, they showed 7 different clips of Malone and Rodman getting intertwined with each other. The biggest one that I can really remember from being a fan and watching those games was they both were running after a ball that was going out of bounds, and they both sort of dove for it. And once the play was dead, they kind of wrestled around outside of the ring. That's the one. But, they kind of would push each other. At one time, there was Bob Costas, who was just, how is this not a flagrant foul? They gotta change the tempo of the game. The referees need to take control. The overall wording of the show was thinking that the NBA was somehow involved with the ratings going up higher if Rodman and Malone would build up this kind of rivalry that would end up being bigger than the game, I guess you can say. That would bring the eyes in. So it was almost like the referees were queued up on what was going down, to the point where they kind of let stuff go as long as it wasn't going into the game. There was never a flagrant foul. There was never any technical fouls issued to them. And almost every time that Rodman and Malone would tussle with each other, there would be like this patting of the butt as they walked away. They really showed this in The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan ESPN documentary on the 98 Bulls, where they talked about Rodman skipping practice and having this kind of like wrestling ambition to, make himself a bigger star somewhere down the road. Bob Costas, as he's commentating, gets really, really upset at this. Never, shines light on WCW, never calls out Nitro, never calls out the Bash at the Beach, but just basically says the reason why they're wrestling around out there is because of the fact that they're going to be wrestling, and why, these athletes such as Rodman and Malone, as high of a caliber athletes they are, why they would bring themselves to these such low standards. Of course, you would think of Bob Costas was supposed to be a part of, I believe, I think it was WrestleMania 7 in Los Angeles, and he ended up dipping out because of his thoughts of what was going on with WWF and the war at the time. So he didn't take Vince's money. And then somewhere later than this, around 2002, HBO has the Bob Costas show, and that's where Vince and Bob Costas are almost get into a fight during the interview. Vince doesn't like the way that Bob is asking questions, and I think Vince really wants to punch him. There's no other way to say it. So I think Bob just isn't the biggest wrestling fan. He did the Naked Gun. He's able to do comedy and kind of laugh at himself. But I don't think he wants to lower what people think of him as a commentator. He wants to be that high standard along the way. But they got down to actually getting the match in. Actually, get back to this real fast. Costas, in the interview today, almost makes it seem like Karl Malone threw the last game of the NBA Finals because of how much he was messing around with Rodman. They were down 3-1. The writing was on the wall that the Bulls were going to win this. The Bulls, I can't remember. I should have looked it up before we started. They either were 70-10. No, they had to have been 70-12 in the regular season. There's 82 games. I think that was their record, but they held the record until it was broken by the Golden State Warriors a few years ago for the most wins in a season. They just were overall dominant. This year, Scotty, Rodman, Jordan, they came to play. They had Will Perdue. They had Bill Buckner. They had Steve Kerr. I'm not sure if Randy Brown was on that team. I think he was. But they just were an all-around good basketball team that there was no beating them. For some reason, Chicago said that there was no money in bringing them all back. It was known that this was going to be the last ride. Jordan won his 6th championship in 8 years. The 2 years that he didn't win it, he was playing baseball because he retired from basketball. I think he got suspended off the books for gambling, but that's just me. But it was big, man. It was really, really big. I think that WCW, they found a lane by bringing in celebrities for these pay-per-views to build them up. The only problem is they used them too much. On this same show, the Giant wrestles against Kevin Green, the football player. At this time, I think he was playing for the Carolina Panthers. Really good linebacker. He ended up getting hurt, and then he ended up coming to the 49ers for a season. They were using Reggie White at one point. Green Bay Packers, defensive lineman, Hall of Famer, one of the best at his position of all time. But a few months from now, they're going to use Jay Leno in a match with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. I think that DDP ends up being Jay Leno's partner as well, which is funny. They used the Tonight Show to set up both of those matches. You would think that the Tonight Show people would fall for it, but Malone in the match looks really, really strong. He's throwing people around. Rodman said that he showed up after drinking all night the night before. It was in San Diego. And he says for the first 15 minutes of a 23-minute match, he's just hungover. He doesn't want to be there. And then after he got hit a couple times, he was into the match. But it's honestly really nothing much to be there. It's just Hollywood Hogan and Dennis Rodman, they got the win because of the Disciple on the outside came in and gave like the stunner, and then Hogan was able to pin DDP. Karl Malone ended up never coming back to WCW. He kind of got his one night in the sun of being a wrestler, and I think he was at the point he just didn't need more money. He's got car lots. He's got, his trucks that he drives. I think he owns car lots in Utah as well as Louisiana. The guy's done it all. So, I just find it big that, Eric Bischoff takes the idea of sort of like getting these guys to interact wrestling style in the NBA finals. Bob Costas, he flipped out. He was basically saying that Malone threw the games. Yeah, I don't think he was asking him to like Pete Rose him or anything like that from the game. But there was one guy who was stretching it far enough to basically say that they should throw out those NBA finals, and LeBron and Michael Jordan would be tied with 5 NBA titles, and LeBron would be looked at as one of the best. But I think he was just being a homer and just trying to find a lane to get there to root for his guy for being a LeBron fan. But we were at times professional wrestling, man. Karl Malone, Dennis Rodman, wrestling in WCW. Rodman, I think he would come back one more time. I can't remember if it was 99 or 2000, but it was actually at the Road Wild show. He wrestles Macho Man Randy Savage in a Falls Count Anywhere. The only thing I really remember from that match is Rodman gets thrown into a porta potty by Macho Man during the match. So Rodman wasn't scared to take a bump. Rodman wasn't scared to look like a fool. I think he just wanted to get paid, man.